Kimchi jjigae is something that anyone with Korean parents had at some point in their lives. And it's actually very easy to make, but with one little twist, little upgrade of an ingredient, you can make this into something that will impress the snobbiest of kimchi jjigae experts. Let's get started. All right, I'm going to list the ingredients after, but basically we're using kimchi, some chili peppers, some garlic, onion. We've got chili paste, we have bean paste, need salt for sure, and the special ingredient I mentioned, we're going to use baby back ribs. Usually in kimchi jjigae, you use pork, but the reason we're going to use the ribs is actually the meat is great, one of my favorite cuts of the pork, but also the bone is going to be the key. The fact that we are going to be boiling the bone, sucking the juices out of that bone to make a broth, that's going to be what makes the flavor that much better for the broth. And on top of that, hey, who doesn't love baby back ribs for meat? Those are our ingredients. The other thing we're going to need, which is a little bit different from most kimchi jjigaes, is we need a pressure cooker. Now, if you don't have a pressure cooker, you can just boil the pork for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but if you have a pressure cooker, it's obviously going to make it a lot quicker. Now, if you've never worked with a baby back rib before, you've got to take the membrane off the back of the rib because it's quite tough and you definitely don't want to be eating that in your stew. So you want to grab a spoon or a knife and you're going to scratch off just from the end right here. You're just going to rub it right off the bone and you don't want to actually peel everything with the spoon or knife. You just want to get enough that you can grab with your hand. Now the problem is if you grab it with your hand, it's going to slip. So you're going to get a paper towel or a kitchen towel, use this to grab the end, and like so, you can see it's a lot easier to rip this off, and you can hear that actually peeling that off. It might not be the most appetizing sound, but it's actually going to make your food taste a lot better. Now it's important to season the meat because you want to keep a little of that flavor in the actual pork itself because it's going to lose a little bit of the flavor that it has in the water and broth once we start boiling it. So make sure you salt it heavily and let it rest for at least an hour with the salt in there to allow that salt to really dig into your meat and give it some flavor. Now, no one person is going to eat this entire rib in this stew, so I am going to cut this off into sections. So I'll give it a cut, we'll throw it in the pot, and I'll show you what it looks like in a moment. Now we have our pot of meat. We're going to add to that 1 clove of garlic minced. Everyone will tell you that garlic is the way to get that smell out of your pork when you're cooking, so you want to use a lot of garlic with pork, especially when you're boiling it like this. Garlic in. And the next step, we're just going to add some water to this and put this into a boil. Once it starts to pressurize, we want to leave that in there for about 20-30 minutes is fine. And let's just add our water in. Let's get a lid on this and we'll see what happens. Now, while our broth is cooking and the pork is getting ready, we're going to work on the vegetables, which is going to add the flavor to our kimchi jjigae. Now, in a separate saucepan, we're going to add some oil and then we're going to fry up our vegetables. Now, with the onions, we just want to get them soft. We definitely don't want to cook them all the way through, and we don't want them to be raw, but we just want to soften them up a bit, get a little bit of that sugar out, and that's going to add some flavor as well to our kimchi. Now our onion is starting to sweat, and this is just about where you want to get it, just to bring out the sugars. We don't want it to brown too much. We don't want to lose too much of that flavor in these onions. So we're going to lower the heat just a little bit to medium. And now I'm going to add our garlic. Garlic burns a lot quicker than onions do, which is why we're going to add it a little bit later, because we don't want the garlic to burn. That's also why we turn down the heat a bit. So once again, we're just going to bring a little bit of that flavor out of the garlic, and then we're going to add our kimchi. You can probably hear the pressure cooker in the background right now, as that is the sound of good old baby back ribs. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more oil, and then we're going to throw our kimchi in. Now you'll notice with kimchi, there's the fleshy part, and then there's also the leafy part. Make sure that you have both of these in there, as they both add different characteristics to your kimchi jjigae. It's important especially to have the fleshy part in the kimchi jjigae. Now that it's starting to cook pretty good, we're going to lower the heat, and you might have a little bit of stuff sticking to the bottom. It might even look like it's burning, but don't worry about that, because once we add our broth in here, it's all going to be taken right off there and added to the flavor of your kimchi jjigae. All right, let's see how our broth is doing. Okay, so now that we've got our broth ready, we're going to pull out the meat first, because we might not necessarily use all of the broth. So we're going to do that in controlled amounts. Oh, look at these ribs. I absolutely love baby back ribs. And in my kimchi jjigae, absolutely fine as well. Now, you don't want to boil the ribs too long, otherwise they're going to fall off the bone, and you don't want it to be quite that done. Obviously, you want it to be cooked enough that it's going to be soft, but not to the point that it's going to be falling off the bone. All right, let's fire up the heat now. And we're just going to deglaze all of that fried kimchi and onions off the bottom of our pan with our broth, which is flavorful in itself. And this is really the key to your kimchi jjigae, is this bone broth from the marrow of the baby back ribs. And once you've got enough, keep it handy, because you never know if you're going to add more. But let's see how we're going to deglaze. Make sure you flip each of the bones as well, so that the meat gets the opportunity to mop up some of that flavorful broth as well. So if you want to add more broth, certainly do so. But remember, this is a stew, not a soup, so don't water it down too much. Okay, so to finish this off, we're just going to let it simmer. And while doing so, we're going to add our final few ingredients, which are going to include our bean paste. This is going to give a little more thickness to the broth, as well as some of the salt that it needs, because remember, we didn't actually put salt in the actual final product yet, just the broth with the pork. And we're also going to add some chili paste. Usually you want to add about half the amount of chili paste as you're adding bean paste. but this will give it a little more flavor. It has some sweetness to it as well. So give that a stir because you want to make sure that the paste is melted right into your stew. And once your pastes are in there, you want to let it simmer, have the paste be allowed to melt in, and then you're just going to finish it off with our garnish, which is going to include some green onion as well as some chili peppers. These are of course optional, but certainly add a nice finishing touch and flavor. That finishes off our kimchi jjigae. Let's take a look at some final plating and you'll see how it all looks in the end. And this is our finished product. So you can see all you need is a bowl of rice. You've got so much flavor in the meat as well as the kimchi that you really don't need any other side dishes with this. The kimchi itself, very flavorful. But of course, the thing that makes this kimchi jjigae special is this piece of meat right here falling off the bones of the baby back rib. Absolutely delicious. Look at how soft that baby back rib is, and the flavor in this is absolutely astounding. Soft, flavorful, perfect. So as you can see, making kimchi jjigae, it's really not that complicated at all. There's nothing sophisticated about what we've done, but that one little extra thing of just adding some baby back ribs into a pressure cooker for 30 minutes, adding that to this recipe is really what makes the difference. So much more flavorful, the meat is really soft, and I guarantee you, any of your Korean friends would be impressed by this meal. You know, I didn't even like kimchi jjigae when I was a kid, and it wasn't until my mother made this for me this way that I really got hooked on this meal.